What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another Reddit video here on the Live Stories channel. My name is Dylan, and today we're going to be exploring some stories from the subreddit Tales from the Squad Car. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Highway Patrol, a truly crazy DUI. I'm in my country's National Highway Patrol. As our jurisdiction is nationwide, and we aren't assigned districts, we sometimes end up on the opposite side of the country from where we started. I live near and started a highway patrol post in the far southwest of my country. One of my favourite childhood places is the east central part of my country. It's a small mountain foothills resort village. I have family there. Recently there's been a lot of stuff happening there. Several big DUI incidents, commercial vehicle issues, and even a big human smuggling incident. It also has a very small police force without much backup. Despite it being a very long drive, 6 hours on a good day realistically, and actually was much longer, I was able to set it up well with another officer who has never been, and the closest department post for a few days of work vacation, and felt like I had great justification. Surprise my family, see some of the places I love, introduce a friend/co-worker to the area, do a lot of good work on the way, and help out a local understaffed department. We drove up there last Tuesday. On the drive, my co-worker and I did a lot of bunny hop stops. Mostly infraction level speeds, 2 criminal speeds, a few commercial vehicle inspections, a handful of random sobriety stops. Didn't really get into anything crazy. We got up there intact. I stopped to see my family. I showed my co-worker/friend some of the sights of the area, and we got booked into hotels. Stayed overnight, and in the morning we got up early to get to the briefings. We went to the local police department briefing at 5:30, did a few petty stops, went to the closest highway patrol post briefing at 7, then got on the arterial highways around the city. Eventually, a black 2000 Ford Ranger just started asking to be pulled over, going 20 km per hour in an 80 km zone, struggling to maintain a lane, going into opposite lanes, heavily tinted, lots of movement in the truck. After attempting to pull this vehicle over, it commences to veer over to the right lane and completely stop. These highways aren't narrow, 1 to 2 lane highway passes with guardrails to vertical drops. These are big, well-maintained 2 lane by 2 lane highways with big emergency lanes. They are hilly because they're in the foothills of the mountains, but you definitely can, and obviously should, get over to the emergency lane when you're getting pulled over. My partner stays behind her, I go around the side and yell through the window to go into the emergency lane. Instant strong odour of alcoholic beverages upon approaching the vehicle, so we get the vehicle in park, often have the driver come out. This is a 40-year-old female, obviously intoxicated, obviously also having some kind of mental crisis. She started making what we thought were furtive gestures, so we elected to search her, and she started getting distressed, saying how can she know we're actually police. Once we detained her, we showed them departmental photo ID per policy, but she refused to show an ID. She was still panicking, so assuming this was primarily a part of the mental crisis, I let her watch me dial the emergency number, then put it on speaker as the dispatcher confirmed that we were in fact the police. According to her, that was enough proof, so we tried to investigate both the criminal and the mental health side a bit more. She blows nearly 4 times the legal limit, but she's jittery, huge pupils, talking all sorts of nonsense, pulling apart her clothes string by string, heavily sweating, highly paranoid, lunging at us, etc. Suggestive more of either a narcotic or mental episode. She had a significant positive for horizontal gaze nystagmus, but was very minimally positive for vertical nystagmus, which suggests further that the alcohol isn't the problem. At this point of the stop, she's getting highly erratic. I want to either sit down on the ground or in the back of the car. She doesn't like either option and begins screaming that she can't go because she's going to take care of the baby, and starts screaming about us killing her. We got abso-bloomin' puzzled and concerned about the baby comment when she refused to elaborate because the police told her not to. After explaining to her again that we are the police, she becomes completely compliant again and nearly a normal drunk for a whole 20 seconds. Then we start pushing about the baby comments and she goes from compliant drunk to sobbing theatrically, instantly, about us killing her baby, who's apparently in the trunk of the car. We convinced her that we wanted to get the baby help and pushed further for information on the baby, and she begins to describe a somewhat rational and detailed description of an infant, including clothes and an identifying scar, etc. There was no baby there in the car or anywhere. The closest thing was a cat. Just to be extra sure of this, we tried to attain the name of a family member to contact and verify she doesn't have kids and figure out what to do. To start, we pushed on her dad's name. She said she didn't have one. Her mum? She gave a name of a dead music star. No siblings, and her significant other was apparently Satan. We put her in my partner's car and began discussing amongst ourselves where we might bring her. When we used some internet detective work and maps to figure out a nearby hospital with a psychiatric emergency centre, she was not impressed by this. She began screaming, telling us to bring her to Satan. Her words, not mine. We called EMS. In the meantime, she somehow managed to take off her pants and start kicking the window. She was yelling incoherently, screaming about us bringing her to Satan, telling us to burn, screaming about spiders and her skin burning and all sorts of insane rubbish. We removed her from the car and hobbled her when the window started being kicked down. The ambulance team arrived within a few minutes and determined that they needed backup, so called more EMS resources and the fire department. Note, where I'm from, the fire department gets rarely involved in medical calls, only major incidents or incidents where urgent assistance is needed. 2 ambulances showed up, an EMS SUV with a doctor and paramedic, and 2 fire trucks. Apart from us 2 and police, it took 14 EMS/FD members to safely restrain and sedate a 40-year-old, 50kg, 158 centimeters tall woman. The EMS personnel gave her something that fits the category of good stuff, where she calmed down just enough to be able to question. Her husband was still apparently Satan, but she supplied Satan's address for us. After reversing the address in the computer, we found her husband's name and identified her. She has a lengthy history of mental health safety holes and an involuntary drug detoxes, both issued by the police, courts and social services. She had a history of PCP intoxication, alcohol abuse, schizophrenia, etc., and she wasn't allowed to drive, and Satan had reported her missing with the car stolen 2 days prior. We were able to contact Satan, who was not very happy as our suspect had apparently been doing well for years and broke down after an argument with her parents. The infant was identified to be a niece who was in safe custody of her parents, and Satan and his family came down within 45 minutes to take custody of the cat and car from me. We didn't end up charging her as it likely wouldn't hold anyway, and we figured out later she was well known to the police. We enjoyed the visit nonetheless, got to see some awesome sights, stayed another night, got some less exciting action and went back the afternoon of last Thursday. Well, it's clear this story wasn't from America if the guy said we sometimes end up on the opposite side of the country, especially after only a 6-hour drive. That won't get you across America that far. Highway Patrol, Cops and Robbers. The initial dispatch was to a local police department for trespassing / a group of people running through multiple properties / hopping fences. The local police couldn't catch up, so we got called out. Entering the neighbourhood, we found a truck bottomed out with doors open. Upon exiting our vehicle, knowing there's only 3 city cops in the neighbourhood, we hear at least 10 people announcing themselves as police from all directions. The hell? In probably less than 10 seconds of being there, I saw someone run through a backyard and jump a fence, continuously running. Since the call was for groups of people running through backyards, and the police were actively chasing various people around town, doing the same thing, that's enough for me to start chasing. I announced myself, realising another officer also announcing themselves as chasing too. I get ready to tase the suspect and announce the final time that this isn't a joke and we're going to tase him. He looks back and belly flops on the ground with arms out, realising he's mushed. I was a little angry because he ran away from me and I handcuffed him and searched him, told him just to be quiet and don't say a word. He complies and we walk back to my car and I put him in the back. Note that he's 16. After all of that happened, I was kind of dumbfounded. Where the hell did my backup go? I get to realising that this is a multi-group, many-person event, so I switch out to my riot belt just for the bundles of zip cliffs. I can still hear 10 plus people yelling police throughout the neighbourhood, despite only 4 of us total being there, but it didn't quite yet click with me. After meetings with local police, they have 2 more vehicles and 2 other suspects detained. Similarly, they haven't talked to their suspect, but I go and talk to one of their suspects as they talk to mine. We both learn that it's a group of teenagers, 20 of them playing cops and robbers, 10v10 with cars. My suspect didn't realise we were the actual police until we had a taser dot on him, and the other suspects didn't know until the city had actually jumped on them. We decided this was a major situation, a group of about 20 teenagers running amok in the neighbourhood, trespassing in an area of the country where many people are very protective of their property, with many that they may accidentally impersonate police to residents, many unknowingly running away from the real police. A big situation. So City called for all sorts of reinforcement. Within 20 minutes we had upwards of 20 real police officers on the scene. We cornered off the neighbourhood completely and made several PA announcements regarding the situation and that the game was over. We ended up catching and detaining all 24 players over the course of 2.5 hours. They all seemed to be the students of a nearby high school. The school sent a bus to collect students. We initially detained everyone for trespassing and brought them to the school for processing. With the assistance of the head teacher, we sorted out the identities and who's who for everybody. We ended up releasing 18 minors to parents, releasing 1 to spend the night with the head teacher, 1 to the hospital for a diabetic problem, and arresting 4, 3 of those 4 arrested for underage drinking and dangerous driving. 1 was charged with criminal resisting arrest, criminal battery on a law enforcement officer, battery by bodily fluid, and personal possession of methamphetamine after threatening to kill an officer, spitting in his face, then trying to fight him in detention. The head teacher also sent out an announcement via phone blast to the parents about the cops and robbers game, essentially saying that we don't allow your kids to break rules whilst playing, know where they're going, and saying the outdoors property in the school is an appropriate and safe place to play versus the streets and neighbourhoods. Well, it sounds like the cops won this time. When's the rematch? Corrections, Noodle Stuffer. So on this lovely day, I was actually helping out the shift, and had been moving inmates, booking some in, calculating some time, etc. Typical tasks that the shift officers were responsible for. We had an inmate, John Doe, up front on a medical observation for narcotics. He'd been there a couple of days, and he'd come off the drugs and was to a point where he could live in normal population. I cleared him with medical and moved him back up to our minimum security pod, when unbeknownst to me at this time, a few of his friends also resided. He gathered his belongings and we proceeded back to the pod. I noticed when I sent him through the metal detector that he seemed quite skittish, but he did it fine and we walked on through the maze of hallways to the housing unit. We get back to the housing unit and enter, and he reunites himself with his buddies. At this point I'm not very concerned with him, and another inmate approaches me about an unrelated situation. I watch John out the corner of my eye and see him walk into the first cell on the mezzanine a little bit too eagerly. His buddies were in close tow as well, and this piques my interest a little bit more. They pulled the door up behind them but didn't close it. Through the small gap I can see John laying on the toilet with his hands up his shorts. I immediately tell the inmate that I was talking to hold up, and I head upstairs whilst putting my gloves on. They heard me coming up because one of his buddies came to the cell door and peeked out before rushing back into the toilet. I abruptly entered his cell and found John Doe fumbling around as if he was pulling his shirt back down. I caught a glimpse of red plastic in his waistband and asked him what he had, and at first he said nothing. I stepped towards him and asked again. He said he had a pack of noodles. So you mean to tell me that you had a pack of noodles stuffed up your pants, and that is why you were laying on the toilet, digging out of your hind end? Well, no, just bloomin' take it, bro. With that, he hands me a plastic wrapper from his waistband. It was a noodle wrapper. Points for effort. Inside, I find 2 cigarettes, and from my training and experience, yeah right, what appears to be a green leafy substance resembling marijuana. Alright John, what else have you got? That's it. Sure, hands on the wall. I search him and find 2 lighters and another cigarette. You boys have anything else I need to know about before I strip this entire cell down to its second to last coat of paint on the walls? Scramble mode activated. Tattoo pick check. Soot check. Another lighter check. I have each inmate stand against the wall outside the cell with the other officer that had just entered the pod, curious to see what was happening. I do a quick search of the cell and find nothing else of interest. Mr. Doe, I'm writing you up for lying/deception, possession of tobacco paraphernalia, and possession of dangerous contraband lighter with criminal charges for possession of marijuana pending review of my report by a deputy sheriff. You can all go back into your cell now. Damn it, /you FBI management, why you gotta be such a hard ass? Just doing my job. Maybe if you hadn't lied to me and given me the noodle pack when I first caught you, this could have been avoided. Man, what the hell ever. Report written and contraband photographed, marijuana passed off to a deputy along with a copy of my report. He took it to disciplinary committee, who unsurprisingly found him guilty. After that his spirit was crushed and he pled guilty to the possession charge. I mean, I'm gonna be totally honest, I almost feel bad for John. He didn't really do much wrong. I know it's prison, but you need a bit of light relief sometimes, am I right? Well guys, that concludes today's video. Please leave a like rating down below if you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.